only display and advertise alcohol in a single non-prominent area. Mr Speaker, I commend this bill to the House.
I call Charles Chauvel.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the work that's gone into the legislation that we are debating today, the work that was done by the Law Commission in its excellent report on the state of alcohol law reform in New Zealand, the work that was done by the officials from the Ministry of Justice, who some of whom I see are present in the gallery today, who gave excellent advice to the Select Committee as we conducted our deliberations, heard submissions and received advice in the 49th Parliament, and also to Leanne Dalzell, who, when she was Minister, introduced a good and comprehensive set of alcohol law reforms which were unfortunately withdrawn by the former Minister, the Honourable Simon Power, and which were essentially confined to the legislative dustbin. And that's a real shame, sir, because 2 or 3 years ago this Parliament could have passed comprehensive alcohol law reform if that hadn't been the history of this matter. Instead, we saw new legislation tabled. It was to have been passed in the previous Parliament, but it was not. The Parliament ran out of time, as it did with so many of the other measures that were being advanced by the former Minister of Justice, and so it is now not until the end of the first year of the next triennium that this Parliament finally gets around to addressing the issue of alcohol law reform. And that, sir, is a shame, because there will have been further unnecessary alcohol-related deaths and illnesses suffered in New Zealand as a result of that delay, and that, sir, must weigh on our consciences. There were, I think, some useful observations made in the Minister's speech and in some of the speeches made by government members about the good innovations that are contained in this bill, and they are undeniable. It is quite clear, sir, that if this bill passes the Parliament, we will have, in general, a better regime for regulating the sale and purchase of alcohol in New Zealand compared to that which exists now. There are some good, logical, technical changes which I commend to the House and which certainly lead me to incline to support the legislation. But, sir, as other speakers have noted, that unfortunately is not the yardstick by which this measure is going to be judged. It's not going to be judged by those sensible technical improvements. It's going to be judged by all the lost opportunities that we as a Parliament have passed up to really try to make a dent in the problematic parts of New Zealand's binge drinking culture, which I think is a problem acknowledged right across the House. Sir, I just want to remind the House of some of those lost opportunities, and they are by way of speaking to some of the supplementary order papers that were voted down in the Committee of the Whole. There was a very, very good suggestion from my colleague Ian Lees-Galloway, who spoke earlier in the debate, that would have put some restrictions on the advertising of alcohol. It would have ensured that the exposure of young people to alcohol advertising was reduced by ending billboard and poster advertising within 300 metres of schools, creating a 9 p.m. watershed for alcohol advertising, and restricting alcohol advertising in cinemas to those films with an R18 rating. There would have also been, under his bill, a committee of officials set up to plan and implement the introduction of greater restrictions on all forms of alcohol promotion in accordance with the Law Commission's report. And it's a great tragedy that that supplementary order paper did not pass into law, because it would have meant a better bill. Similarly, Sir David Clark suggested an amendment that would have increased the restrictions on the advertising of alcohol on television in order to prevent the relentless presentation of the product in the attractive light that it is currently portrayed, which we all know from the evidence just tends to increase consumption. Again, all the evidence before the Select Committee was tackling advertising in a sensible way would really help to get the message across that this isn't a normal product. It does have hazards if it's not consumed appropriately and responsibly, and yet we failed as a Parliament to progress that amendment. There was another amendment which I supported, Sir, from my colleague Lewisa Wall, which would have ensured that off-licence premises could not be located within a 1 kilometre radius of an early childhood centre or a primary, intermediate or secondary school. Now, I acknowledge that amendment had some issues around workability. But I cannot forget, Mr Williamson, the evidence that I heard at the Select Committee from schools in low decile areas which are having to deal with the fact that their kids walk past liquor stores every day on the way to school. This is a normal product. The advertising is out on the street on sandwich boards. Those kids in those areas are exposed to these advertising messages right from the beginning. And the evidence is that the normalisation of alcohol in that way is going to be detrimental for many of those children. There were some other very good amendments, Sir. The restriction on trading hours for off-licence proposal that Andrew Little put up in his supplementary order paper was one that I think it's a shame we missed the opportunity to progress. One that I think really did deserve better from the House than it got was Leanne Dalzell's suggestion that we empower the Minister with the ability to set a minimum price regime for alcoholic products. Now, contrary to all the propaganda and all the misinformation that was put out about that proposal, all it would have done is inserted a clause in the legislation giving the Minister a power. She could have taken advice from the officials. It could have been a sliding scale type arrangement which would have only affected alcoholic products that were truly identified as problematic. And again, the evidence we heard in the Select Committee was that that's cheap wine in supermarkets. That's what people use to preload before they go out on the town and buy from on licences. And that's an area where we have to get more serious and where very little will be done by this legislation to make a change. Sir, one of the members of the government benches interjected earlier that local alcohol policies would go a long way to solving one of the problems that I was speaking about earlier, and they will, where they exist. But one of the things that I think best typifies the lost opportunities in this legislation is our failure to have made local alcohol policies a comprehensive requirement on local government regions. Because again, at the Select Committee, what we were told is that the areas of greatest deprivation are often the areas where it's hardest to get civic involvement into local government, so that people will push for stronger regulation of the availability of advertising in their communities. In other words, the places where you most need a local alcohol policy will probably be the last places to get them, if they get them at all, because we've made it a matter for the discretion of the local authority, rather than saying to the local authority, look, you need to have one of these for the well-being of your community, and here are the sorts of things you might want to put in it. The other problem, Sir, is that we've very much restricted the matters that local government can deal with in local alcohol policies. They're not able to take a health promotion approach. They're simply restricted to the old regulatory philosophy about the availability of alcohol. And again, that's a lost opportunity in this legislation. So there were a number of other very good supplementary order papers, and I think the failure of those supplementary order papers to progress, simply because they were moved by the opposition and because the government was whipped on every issue in this bill rather than the age issue, is one of the reasons why in the media and in the public there is this very justifiable sense of lost opportunity with this legislation. And so I want to conclude just by praising the work that's been done throughout this debate by Alcohol Action New Zealand. And Professor Doug Selman, the Director of the National Addiction Centre, Professor Geoffrey Robinson, the Chief Medical Officer in Wellington, and Professor Jenny O'Connor, the Head of Department of Preventative and Social Medicine at Otago, have issued a statement today, and I want to read the last paragraph of that statement in conclusion. History will judge those MPs who willfully planned and led the wasted opportunity to do something to help the hundreds of thousands of New Zealanders being harmed by weak alcohol laws. Their failure is seen in the bill due to be passed in Parliament today. Of particular note, Key, Dunn, Burrows, Joyce, Collins and Power.
I call to Euroflavel.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker, kia ora tātou katoa.